back, baby!
What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to D&CGaming Legion. My name is Dan.
And my name is Chris, and I just like to apologize for the lack of uploads lately. Long story short, I've been dealing with some personal issues, so that kind of stopped us from making some YouTube videos, but now we got some time, so here we are.
So thank you for joining us, and let's get on with it. So, if you're joining us today and you clicked on the video, you're obviously wondering the same thing we are. Why is a story important in games? You know, if you've been keeping up with the media today for games and such, you'll notice that a lot of game companies are shying away from putting a story into their game, or at least focusing much more on multiplayer than a story. In fact, some companies are even talking about getting rid of story mode altogether. And that's a problem, and in this video we're going to cover why.
Specifically, we'll be talking about some games that either don't have story or are focusing way too much on multiplayer, and likewise we'll also be talking about games that are absolutely nailing the story aspect of their game.
So first of all, we should mention the games that don't have a story at all. Specifically games like Fortnite, Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which is not out yet, but it's going to be a train wreck, and games of that nature, things that just don't have a story altogether. That's a problem just because if it keeps going in that direction, every game is going to end up being Fortnite or Call of Duty or something along those lines, and that's not fun. I mean, it's fun for what they're going for, but a story is a big part of that game, and, well, here's why. So the most important point I could probably make about having a story in a game is simply content. And what I mean by that is, if you pay $60 for a game and you only get multiplayer, I would say you're probably getting ripped off, because when you pay $60 for a game, you want everything it has to offer. You want a great campaign, and you want a solid multiplayer experience. That, to me, is how you make a good game. That's the whole reason games like Fortnite or League of Legends or Smite or games of that nature are free, because they don't have a story. They don't have a lot to offer. Why would you pay for something that should be a free-to-play game? I mean, if you look at a game like Warframe, that game has somewhat of a story. It has multiplayer, and it has a lot of different characters, and that game is free. And it seems like a huge game that should cost some money, but it's free. So, if anything, all games should aspire to be like that. So, here's the big question. Is a story important? Well, I mean, yeah, of course it is. It's probably the most important part of the game, even more so than multiplayer. And so many companies are not focusing on that today, and that's a problem. And here's why. To make a good story, you need a few key aspects. One, it has to be memorable. Two, the player has to be extremely invested in the story in order to care about it. 3, I think there has to be some level of character connection. And 4, a story is what makes a game worth the money, to me at least. You know, a game can have multiplayer, but that's not going to make it necessarily good.
So let's start off with a few games that have very memorable stories. A few games that come to mind would be Red Dead Redemption, Halo, and God of War. Starting off with God of War, one thing that made it such a memorable game was just the grand scale of things. I mean, it really felt like you really went on a journey. I mean, you start off on a boat fighting a giant Hydra, but then you go to the city of Athens, and you're fighting your way through there, then you end up in a desert, then you end up in a giant temple on the back of a Titan, just to get this treasure chest. It's such a huge journey, but when you finish it, it just feels like you just climbed a mountain, and that's what makes it so memorable to me. Moving on to Red Dead Redemption, one thing that made that game so memorable was just how well it captured the life of, well, being a cowboy in the West. I mean, just the desert, just riding around on horses, everything, the shooting, being able to tie up people with rope and then leave them on train tracks. Just a really, really just cool concept, and we don't really have too many cowboy games out there, so that's part of why it's so memorable. And last but not least, we have Halo. Really any Halo game for the most part. What made it so memorable was just, well, the world. Just the sci-fi setting that the game has, the alien species and their technology, the futuristic, like, Spartan program. It all was just such a cool concept that we didn't really see too much of lately. For its time, I should say.
Now, Chris makes really good points. Those are all really memorable games, and there's a list and we can go on and on. But what sets these games apart from games that we get today, like Fortnite or Call of Duty, those games, what's memorable about them to you? Like the time maybe you jumped off the top of your fort in Fortnite and blew somebody up with an RPG to get a win? I mean, sure, it's memorable, But is it bringing back the nostalgia that you felt playing games like Halo, God of War, Red Dead Redemption, etc.? To me, it doesn't. And that's one of the reasons why story is really important. Another major part of any story, or at least to making a story good, is connecting with the characters that you encounter throughout the game. And there's many games out there that have a lot of great characters in them. For example, Halo, Borderlands, Far Cry 3, the Modern Warfare series, and Mass Effect, just to name a few. Starting off with Halo, we have one of Microsoft's classic icons of gaming. We have Master Chief, who I can't think of many characters better than him. He's just someone you connect with on an emotional level because you see what he's going through. You can see the harshness of war getting to him throughout the game series. And to me, that's good writing.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
Of course, in Borderlands, you have the psychotic, handsome Jack, who was more or less the Joker of his video game series. He's just funny, he's insane, he makes you laugh. Occasionally, he'll make you cry. But he's one of those characters that you just love to hate and hate to love.
You're a savage. You're a maniac. You are a bandit. And I am the goddamn hero!
Far Cry 3 has yet another example of a great character. We have Voss. He was one of the main villains of the game. And the character was just so well written that you can actually feel the fear that you're supposed to be feeling when you have an encounter with him in the game. Like, it's scary how real it feels.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
Now, if we take a trip back in time to when Call of Duty was actually a good game, you'll see during the Modern Warfare series, you had a slew of great characters. But for the sake of time, we're just going to mention the one, Captain Price. He was incredible for his time. He was the grizzled old war veteran who would lead you through the harsh battles, and you really felt a connection to him, and it grew over all 3 games.
On your feet, soldier! We are leaving!
And last but not least, when it comes to characters you really connect with on an emotional level, we have a ton of people from Mass Effect, which I'm just going to name a select few that are personally my favorites. Obviously, you have Commander Shepard, which he's the main character you expect to connect with him on an emotional level, especially in a game like Mass Effect. Then you have a character like Mordin Solus. He was one of those characters where he's just comical, he's the uptight scientist, and he's just so much fun, and spoiler alert if you haven't played Mass Effect, just skip ahead, we'll tell you when. When Mordin dies, it hits you hard. It hits you really hard, and you feel like you just lost one of your best friends. Then you have a character like Garrus Vakarian. Garrus was there from the beginning, he was there to the end, he was with Shepard on all of his journeys, and he was your true best friend. It was Shepard and Vakarian against the world, and they stopped the Reapers together. He was just one of those characters that I can't imagine the game without him. Then, of course, we have Thane Krios, the legendary Drell assassin. Thane was one of those characters where, as you got to know him, you grew to feel sad for him, but you also loved him and you wanted to do more to help him. If you played the game, you know Thane's story already, and you also know how it ends, so spoiler alert, skip ahead. When Thane sacrifices himself for you, it nearly had me in tears. That was one of the most powerful moments of that game, because again, like with Mordin, you feel like you lost a family member, a friend, and that's what makes a good story. When you do something like that in a story, you know you have a good writing team. When it draws the emotion out of you like that, that's how you know it's perfect. And lastly, for characters that you connect with emotionally in games, I'm going to talk about my favorite character from any video game ever, and she's also from Mass Effect. It's Jack. If you've played Mass Effect 2, you remember Jack. She was the gruff, sarcastic, psychotic biotic. That's what they called her. Jack was one of those characters where she was hard on the outside, but soft on the inside. No pun intended. When you first meet Jack, she hates everything, but the more you get to know her, the more she opens up, and the more you see this scared, vulnerable girl. And to me, that's also good writing, just because you can completely ignore that type of storyline with her, and she can be psychotic and angry the whole story, but if you make the right choices, you'll learn much more about her character, and it makes you connect with her. All the way up until the end of Mass Effect 3, where she draws the Omega tattoo on Shepard, or whatever it was. Like, another really powerful moment in games, and it just really makes you connect with the character. I don't know how else to explain it.
And just to add in my 2 cents to pretty much everything he just said, 2 characters I'd like to quickly just mention would be Marcus and Dom from Gears of War. In fact, you also could mention Cole and Baird as well. Like, all 4 of those characters, they all have a great dynamic. I mean, they're always going back and forth with each other, making constant jokes, making you laugh, and it just feels like they have such a strong bond between each other that they just forge throughout the entire course of the story.
And just to really quickly wrap up on character connection and that aspect of gaming, let's just look at games. I know we're beating a dead horse using these as examples, but Call of Duty and Fortnite today are really good examples of characters that you don't connect with, especially because they don't have a story. I mean, even if you could connect with them on some sort of emotional level, what would you have to remember them by? Would you remember the guy running around in a bear suit killing you with a pickaxe in Fortnite? Because that, to me, again, it's not memorable. It's not connecting me to that character in any sort of way. It's just playing the game. And at the end of the day, do you really want to settle for the bare bones minimum of what you would expect for a game? Because I don't. So finally, that brings us to our last point on what makes a good story and why it's important. And that's keeping the player invested in your story. Well, how do you do that? Well, you take all of the things we've discussed previously, put them together, and make them work together. And if you're keeping a player invested with great story, great characters, memorable moments, they're gonna love the game. No doubt, no question. I mean, you can look at any game that does it great. Mass Effect, Halo, the Witcher series. All fantastic, phenomenal games with stories. And they don't rely on multiplayer solely alone to keep the fan base.
For example, some games that rely on multiplayer alone with no story, such as games like Sea of Thieves and the upcoming Black Ops 4. With both of these games, you'll be pretty much just playing multiplayer because both of them are online only, and there's no single player, so you'll be running around COD fighting 5-year-olds teabagging you, or running or sailing around in Sea of Thieves fighting skeletons again and again and again.
Now, I just want to point out, because we are going kind of hard against multiplayer here. We're not against having multiplayer in games. In fact, I think it's another, if not almost equally important part of the game, along with the story. But there should be a balance between the two. You can't just overshadow the story by focusing completely on multiplayer, because that takes half the experience away from the game. And that's not good for anybody, when it comes down to it. There needs to be equal parts focus on a good story and a good multiplayer experience. When you do that right, you have a good game.
If you do the thing, and you do it right, and you don't fuck it up, it works. It just works.
And honestly, it's not that hard to do. It's just, the community of gaming today is bad. We're all aware of it. We've experienced it. There's loot crate controversy, RNG. We could go on and on. But the point we're trying to make here is, most companies today see that people only care about multiplayer, or at least that's what they're assuming to see. And that's not the case. There's a huge amount of people that love having a great story experience, and to just get rid of that completely, like some game companies want to do, is just unfair and not doing justice to the games. I think we've gone on about this long enough. There's a ton more we could say, but for the sake of time, we're running a little long here. I just want to mention one last thing. It's slightly off topic, but it still has to do with the problems in gaming today, and overshadowing a story for something else. The Battle Royale hype train. Fortnite took off like a rocket. It's super popular, and I'm not against it. I'm really not. But every game now that has multiplayer in it is following suit. You have Battlefield 5 is going to have a Battle Royale mode. The new Call of Duty that's not having a story, which I feel like they could have focused on instead of a Battle Royale mode, is getting one. So, I mean, where do you stop with the Battle Royale? Like, what's next? Are we going to have a Batman Arkham Battle Royale? Skyrim Battle Royale Edition? God of War Battle Boyale? The Sims 5 Battle Royale? I mean, where does it end? If every game just keeps jumping on this Battle Royale hype train, then every game is going to be like that in the future. And that's not going to end well for anybody. If games just keep following the same exact formula like Call of Duty does year after year after year, people are going to get burnt out, and I see it as the game industry is just gonna crash.
I mean, yeah, what he said.
Anyway, that about wraps it up. We want to thank you for watching. If you liked the video, if you agree with us in any way, please share it around. Let it get spread around so more people hear about it. Because if we don't speak up and voice our opinions about this, it's not going to change, and it's only going to get worse from here.
And we care about the future of gaming. We don't want this to get, that bad. So obviously, if you like the video, hit the like button down below, hit the subscribe button down below, and stay tuned for more videos.
And feel free to leave us some comments. Let us know your thoughts on what you think about the video and what you think about having a story in a game. And as always, we will see you next time. My name is Dan.
And my name is Chris.
And we will see you later.